Welcome to Sino-Warfare with Ralph D. Sawyer.
As most people know, Sunzi's infamous chapter Employing Spies is the world's first focal contemplation of spycraft. Nevertheless, throughout China's imperial period, self-proclaimed keepers of the truth viciously condemned its unrighteousness and its advocacy of dastardly methods. The West reacted similarly when the book was first translated a couple of centuries ago. Sunzi's motivation was impugned, his principles vilified, and the need for spies disparaged. Now, because of warfare's inescapable impact, Sunzi advocated an all-source, informationally based approach. However, economic factors were equally important because prolonged combat debilitates the people and impoverishes the state, as already discussed. Nevertheless, perhaps because he realized it's difficult to persuade kings to allocate funds for intangible intelligence efforts instead of highly visible weapons and massive numbers of troops, Sunzi began by condemning opaque generals who begrudged the necessary expenses. He says, armies remain locked in a standoff for years to fight for victory on a single day. Yet generals begrudge bestowing ranks and emoluments of 100 pieces of gold and therefore do not know the enemy's situation. This is the ultimate inhumanity. Such a person is not a general for the people, an assistant for the ruler, or the arbiter of victory. Earlier, he described the crushing cost and adverse economic impact. Quote, when provisions are transported far off, the 100 surnames are impoverished. When their strength has been expended and their wealth depleted, the houses in the central plains will be empty. The expenses of the 100 surnames will be some 7/10 of whatever they have. The ruler's irrecoverable expenditures, such as ruined chariots, exhausted horses, armor, helmets, arrows, and crossbows, halberd-tipped and spear-tipped protective shields, strong oxen, and large wagons, will consume 6/10 of his resources. Attacking fortified cities was also proving increasingly expensive and threatened to drain the state's coffers. Separately, Sunzi pointed out the dire effects of ignorance. Quote, one who does not know the plans of the feudal lords cannot forge preparatory alliances. One who does not know the topography of the mountains and forests, ravines and defiles, wetlands and marshes cannot maneuver the army. One who does not employ local guides will not secure advantages of terrain. One who does not one of these 4 or 5 cannot command the army of a hegemon or a true king. Conversely, because it's essential to prevent others from gaining this sort of knowledge, measures to supplement the commander's efforts to be unfathomable must be implemented. For example, on the day the government mobilizes the army, close the passes, destroy all tallies, do not allow their emissaries to pass through. As mentioned in our first talk, by assessing the likelihood of victory through quantitative examinations, instead of appealing to nebulous spiritual forces, Sunzi rejected the age-old practice of divination in favor of human activity. He said, the means by which enlightened rulers and sagacious generals moved and conquered others, that their achievements surpassed the masses, was advanced knowledge. Advanced knowledge cannot be gained from ghosts and spirits, inferred from phenomena, or projected from the measures of heaven, but must be gained from men, for then it will be knowledge of the enemy's true situation. The question then becomes how to acquire the necessary information. Local informants, the local guides just mentioned, and defectors have the greatest familiarity with an area and its developments, though they are also prejudiced by the immediacy of their perceptions and handicapped by partial knowledge and rumors. Recourse, therefore, has to be to trained agents who are tasked with ferreting out information and ascertaining the actual situation. Employing Spies advocates deploying several types of spies whose operations and objectives allow them to be classified into 5 categories: local, internal, turned or double agents, dead, also known as expendable, and living. Sunzi says, when all five are employed together and no one knows their Tao, it's termed spiritual methodology. They are a ruler's treasures. The text also provides a useful expansion.
For local spies, employ people from the local district. For internal spies, employ people who hold positions in their government. Double agents employ the enemy's spies. Expendable spies are employed to spread disinformation outside the state. Provide our expendable spies with false information and have them leak it to the enemy's agents. Living spies return with their reports.
It should be noted that the local spies mentioned here differ significantly in nature from local guides and local informants because they are tasked with actively seeking information rather than already knowing it. However, defectors can be unsurpassed sources before time erodes the value of their knowledge, and despite potentially duplicitous intent, especially if they previously held important positions. In concluding the chapter, Sunzi acknowledges two men whom he identifies as China's first spies, Yi Yin and the Tai Gong. Quoting, in antiquity, when the Shang dynasty arose, they had Yi Yin in the Sha. When the Zhou arose, they had Tai Gong in the Shang. Obviously, the enlightened rulers and sagacious generals who were able to get intelligent spies invariably attained great achievements. This is the essence of the military, what the three armies rely on to move. Now, as discussed in our rather massive Tao of Spycraft, oracle bone inscriptions confirm Yi Yin's existence and his honored place in the Shang ancestral hierarchy. From later accounts, it appears he was a true internal spy, somewhat dispatched by King Tang on the Shang to serve at the Sha palace and gain vital information, if not also subvert the Sha. In contrast to Tai Gong, who acted as chief strategist to Kings Wen and Wu of the Zhou as they plotted the state's ascension and the Shang's overthrow, he was a true defector. Similarly, though unmentioned in The Art of War, Wu Zishu, who reputedly introduced Sunzi to King Helu, not only defected from Chu after having been a high official, but also sought to employ his knowledge to destroy it. Double agents are particularly important because of what they know about the enemy's military affairs and spy apparatus. Sunzi therefore says, you must search for enemy agents who have come to spy on us. Tempt them with profits. Instruct and retain them. Double agents can thus be obtained and employed. Through the knowledge gained from them, you can recruit local and internal spies. Your expendable spies can spread their falsehoods and use them to misinform the enemy. And our living spies can be employed as times require. Separately, he added, the ruler must know the 5 aspects of espionage work. This knowledge inevitably depends on turned spies. Therefore, you must be generous to double agents. In this regard, Sunzi identifies the sort of internal information that must be acquired, primarily by internal and double agents. In general, as for the armies you want to strike, the cities you want to attack, and the men you want to assassinate, you must first know the names of the defensive commander, his assistants, staff, door guards, and attendants. You must have our spies search out and learn them all. Although merely mentioned without further elaboration, identifying men for assassination implies agents were targeting individuals for elimination. When coupled with disinformation and manipulation efforts, it becomes obvious that early Chinese spy agencies, however tasked and organized, had already acquired an activist orientation. The chapter also notes some fundamentals that must be observed when undertaking spy operations. Basically, agents venturing into the field must be well rewarded in order to motivate them. Close relations should be maintained with them, and secrecy ensured. Sunzi says, of all the 3 armies' affairs, no relationship is closer than with spies. No rewards more generous than those given to spies, and no affairs more secret than those pertaining to spies. If the mission is exposed before it begins, the spy and those he informs should all be put to death. The same problems seem to have plagued intelligence operations in antiquity as today. For Sunzi says, unless someone has the wisdom of a sage, he cannot use spies. Unless he is benevolent and righteous, he cannot employ spies. Unless he is subtle and perspicacious, he cannot perceive the substance in intelligence reports. It's subtle, subtle. There are no areas in which one does not employ spies. Even though spies succeeded in penetrating the enemy and gaining useful information, battlefield intelligence tended to be derived from enemy activity and observable physical phenomena. The art of war contains a dozen or more important observations together with their interpretation, a few of which might be reprised here to conclude our discussion. Some explain the significance of actual activities.
If large numbers of trees move, the enemy is approaching. If birds take flight, there's an ambush. If the animals are afraid, the enemy's forces are mounting a sudden attack. Soldiers who stand about leaning on their weapons are hungry. If the ones drawing water drink first, they are thirsty. If they see potential gain, but don't know whether to advance, they are tired. If the enemy cries out at night, they are afraid. If their flags and pennants move about, they are in chaos. One whose troops repeatedly congregate in small groups here and there and whisper together has lost the masses.
A few betray intent.
One who speaks deferentially but increases his preparations will advance. One who speaks belligerently and hastily advances will retreat. One who seeks peace without setting any prior conditions is executing a stratagem. One who has emissaries come forth with offerings wants to rest for a while. If there are many visible obstacles in the heavy grass, it's to make us suspicious.
Further information on early Chinese intelligence practices can be found in our Tao of Spycraft, and on phenomena and their interpretation in Lever of Power. This concludes our examination of the art of war, but not the key Swin family concepts, because our upcoming talks will focus on Swin Bean's understanding and tactics, after which we'll revisit intelligence practices in traditional China in several talks. I hope you will join us. And remember, if you find these talks worthwhile, please hit the subscriber button, which will of course not cost you anything, but will help ensure our continued visibility. Thank you for watching.